team of Alabama students, faculty, and staff started the historic run at the Capitol, headed west on Washington Avenue to Court Street, ran to the bypass, and then headed towards Selma.
We have a team of 22 of what we call designated runners to make sure that all of the distance is covered. Each runner is responsible for covering a 10-mile section. They may invite other people to run the sections with them. We're going out today with 3 runners starting from the Capitol, and they'll take us out 10 miles, which should be near Danley Field, and then they'll be relieved by another team, and we'll keep on rotating through the day here. We would like to make 90 to 100 miles today if possible.
The run is one of a series of events celebrating the University of Alabama's 150th birthday. The runners are carrying a proclamation by the governor recognizing the sesquicentennial.
We selected this route because it will touch 3 state capitals, Montgomery, Cahaba, and Tuscaloosa, and also it'll be very close to the actual 150-mile distance.
The run ends tomorrow at the University of Alabama's Bryant-Denny Stadium, where the runners will present the governor's proclamation at a halftime ceremony during the A-Day game. Jane Matheson, WSFA TV News.
Faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. The Montgomery Police Department has fielded a team in the Civic League for 6 years. This year's team is coached by Corporal Bobby Crew.
We just try to go out and have a good time.
I don't guess too many people argue with you, do they?
No, the umpires take issue with us sometimes, you know.
Wayne Butler, the pitcher out there, he's got some style.
Yeah, he's got the biggest belly on the team, and he likes to think he's pretty good.
Well, let's see, you got, what, a 1-game winning streak. You think that's going to continue?
We'll just have to find out next week.
They'll need a streak to reach the National Police Tournament like they did in 1976, or the state softball tourney as they did a year later. Perhaps there's a tobacco chewing tournament. Dave Cody, WSFA TV Sports.
The golf course is in nice shape. Little conversation about the greens over there. They're going to be fine. They're going to be very quick. I think scores are going to probably go up at Augusta.
When Governor James announced his proposal to unearmark taxes, there were rumblings among legislators that the idea was a long shot. Tuesday, the Senate Finance and Taxation Committee killed the bill. Coleman's finest St. John introduced the bill on behalf of the governor. The bill wouldn't in itself have changed earmarking, but instead would have called for a vote of the people to decide if the taxes should be unearmarked. After the bill and 2 similar versions were killed, Governor James called it politics as usual, a victory for the special interests. In the House, the State Special Education Trust Fund bill popped up briefly. Ways and Means Chairman Walter Owens brought an 8-bill appropriations package that included 2 controversial bills. One of the bills would have required local school boards to pick up some of the cost of teacher retirement premiums. When the House rejected that idea, Owens was forced to retreat with his budget proposal in order to change his trust fund bill to include the retirement costs but still remain within the total budget. There were two other bills that passed the House that would affect taxes this week. One bill would exempt prescription drugs from sales tax. That would mean an estimated loss of $5 to $9 million for the education budget. But the second bill would levy a tax on the casual sales of cars, trucks, mobile homes, trailers, and so forth. And this bill would reportedly make up the lost taxes because of the prescription drug exemption. Both of the bills now go to the Senate. Alcohol sales prompted another brief filibuster in the Senate this week as Senator Ed Robertson of Northport debated against a bill that would give counties and cities control over alcohol sales. The bill would let county or city residents decide for themselves, rather than by statewide vote, whether they want to be wet or dry. Robertson argued the bill would further the evils of alcohol. Others argued the issue involves home rule or local control of a local issue. The number of ideas on how to spend the $449 million in oil lease money increased this week. Senator Sonny Callahan of Mobile suggested the money be invested, netting an estimated $53 million a year for the state in investment returns. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
He becomes older, he will not depart from it. We want you to learn how to steal second base and not somebody else's bicycle. While we're learning all the lessons of life, more than anything else, we want you to have a good time. That's what it's all about. This whole complex, family-oriented. And that's what we want in Montgomery, is a strong family unit.
All right. Went the wrong way, Faye.
According to company president Paul Smith, veterinarians and pet owners alike have called preferred pet protection from as far away as California to ask about Pedicare. Smith is careful to stress, however, that protection is not insurance and only offers limited coverage.
The cost is $75 a year for dogs, $60 for cats. We provide 75% of the veterinarian's charges for sickness and 85 for accidents. Of course, we don't pay for any of the routine shots that they have to have.
Old Southern Life Insurance Company President Roy Epperson conceived the idea of pet protection several years ago, but the company didn't materialize until December 1980. Part of the company's success comes from working closely with veterinarians.
The veterinarians tell us that the people, their clients, have been looking for something like this for many, many years. In fact, we are fortunate having 6 leading veterinarians in the state serving on our advisory committee.
Pedicare clients are also free to select the vet of their choice, since the coverage extends to all licensed veterinarians. Jane Matheson, WSFA TV News.
O'Connell and Jim Huggins dropped in right before spectators were awaiting the arrival of the 4 flyers from the 187th High-Speed Precision Aero Team. 4 flyers climb to speeds of up to 500 miles per hour. Air National Guard officials say it takes several months of practice to perform at an air show, and officials say when the pilots are all ready, they put on quite a show. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
Earlier this week, Gary Cooper said his goodbyes to Capitol Hill, at least for the present. The Cooper saga had ended when Governor James and the Pensions and Security Board met in secret and voted to fire the P&S Commission chairman. The firing was the culmination of a dispute between Cooper and the governor over what to cut out of the P&S budget as part of the economic austerity plans the state is working on. The Public Service Commission, meanwhile, held its first meeting without Pete Matthews, who had resigned last week as a PSC commissioner. Alabama Power was the first major item on the agenda with a rate hike request. This one is for $324 million. The 2 remaining commissioners, Billy Joe Camp and Jim Folsom Jr., decided to take the maximum allowable time to think about the request, suspending discussion on it for 6 months until October. In the meanwhile, though, the PSC continued its review of another rate hike request, this one from Alabama Gas. Alagasco is asking for $12.3 million. The increase would increase your bill about $1.30 a month. That discussion will continue this coming week. And a former executive assistant to a PSC commissioner was in court this week, but not for very long. Steve Wadlington, former assistant to then PSC Commissioner Jim Ziegler, had been accused of taking a $5,000 campaign contribution from a Birmingham contractor who did work for South Central Bell. 2 days into Wadlington's trial, Judge William Gordon dismissed the case. Judge Gordon said the prosecution had not corroborated any of its charges against Wadlington. Former state disaster official Tuffy Deep, meanwhile, was deciding to appeal a conviction. Deep was convicted of stealing a portable building while he was deputy director of the Disaster Housing Office in Mobile after Hurricane Frederick. He was sentenced to 3 years in jail. The appeal delays the start of the sentence, which had been scheduled for this past week. In the wake of the assassination attempt on President Reagan, former Alabama Governor George Wallace made a rare nationwide TV appearance this past week. Originating in the studios here at Channel 12, the governor was interviewed on the Good Morning America program. Governor Wallace said he's still against gun control. Governor Wallace says it's just too late to try to start coming up with an effective gun control system, and he points out that anyone who would ignore the law against shooting a president would certainly ignore any gun control law as well. There was reaction to the assassination attempt on Capitol Hill here in Montgomery this week as well. Security is being beefed up around the state capitol. The increased security is aimed at better control of the press, of visitors in the balconies overlooking the House and Senate chambers, and better control of people demonstrating at the Capitol. On another subject from Capitol Hill, Governor James had a bitter pill to swallow this past week. The pill was served up by the Senate Finance and Taxation Committee. Chris Grimshaw looks at the Legislative Week in Review.
It was a very entertaining game, though perhaps too many turnovers to suit Bear Bryant, who assumed his accustomed neutral position in the press box. This Ken Coley pass was the first of a half-dozen turnovers for the white team. Kenny Simon, the Montgomery junior, who's been hampered by too many injuries his first two seasons, got the red team close enough on this 11-yard run to give Peter Kim a gimme field goal, 3-0 Reds early. The Whites scored the first touchdown. Joe Carter with a nice bit of running to cash a poor punt by Walter Lewis, who gave the White team only 25 yards to go. It was 7-3 White. Freshman quarterback Andy Martin got clobbered by Tim Gann on his first play. Dante Bramlett got it, and the red team had another big break. On 4th and 2 at the goal line, Kenny Simon made a good move on Jim Bob Harris to score. Red 10, White 7. Shortly came the best catch of the day. Andy Martin, the quarterback who had fumbled on the previous series, showed a strong arm. He let it fly, and Keith Marks made a splendid catch, 62 yards for the touchdown. The point was missed. Halftime, it was White 13, Red 10. In the second half, it was all red. Kenny Simon capped an 85-yard, 10-play drive to open the third quarter. The Reds had the lead for good. Walter Lewis appears ready to battle Ken Coley for the quarterback job this fall. This toss to the fleet Jesse Bendros at the 1-yard line set up the next Red touchdown. And Lewis did a bit of fancy stepping to score the final Red touchdown, while the White team could not find the handle at all in the second half. Before the game, Bear Bryant hoped his team's kicking game and defense could be able to hold things together till they can find some offensive punch. Well, Coach, 31-13 ain't too bad a day on the scoreboard. This is Phil Snow reporting from Tuscaloosa.
Of laws. Yeah. Elected to the presidency, all of the members of the Washington family. Mrs. Mark.
It was the Vice President's first major speaking engagement outside the Washington area since the assassination attempt of President Reagan 2 weeks ago. Bush expressed his regrets to the capacity crowd on behalf of the president, saying Reagan was looking forward to visiting the black institution and sharing in its 100th birthday. Bush says the Founders Day celebration honors not only the lifetime contributions of the school's founder, but the achievements and cultural heritage of all black colleges and universities as well, which he says the Reagan administration is determined to preserve. Turning to politics, the vice president outlined what he called the young administration's goals, saying it's pledged a fresh, innovative approach toward solving failed political flim-flam policies of the past and moving toward progression in the future. Bush says the administration absolutely supports the nation's civil rights laws, and he told the audience to put aside totally unfounded doubts about the administration's commitment to protecting the rights of minorities.
And believe me when I say, put aside your doubts. In this president and in his administration, black and minority Americans have a man who is committed to act, not to deal in this rhetorical flim-flam, to act to improve the quality of life for those who have suffered from bigotry and discrimination in the past. We are committed to the principle of equal justice under the law.
Then Bush visited the George Washington Carver Museum, where he signed autographs. Inside, Tuskegee's outgoing president, Dr. Luther H. Foster, said today was certainly a momentous occasion. Tuskegee Institute can now move ahead to the next 100 years. The black institution has the assurance from the Reagan administration to continue the dream started by its founder, Booker T. Washington, 100 years ago today. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News, Tuskegee.
Governor James greeted Vice President Bush on his initial arrival in Montgomery this morning, but he wasn't there when Bush returned this afternoon. But other prominent Montgomeryans were, including Mayor Emery Fulmer. The room where the reception took place was small and crowded, and security was tight. The media was allowed to move freely outside, but once inside, a Chief Washington aide kicked reporters and photographers out after only a few minutes. During the reception, Bush re-emphasized Ronald Reagan's economic philosophy. He admits there's been some erosion of the overall package, but he says now that the president is out of the hospital, the administration will be able to keep Congress focused on Reagan's goals. Bush also complimented U.S. Senator Jeremiah Denton, saying he has an excellent record and also understands Reagan's policies. And saying so long, thank you, Bush returns to Washington to begin a new week with President Reagan back in the White House. At Danley Field, Jane Matheson, WSFA TV News.
We plan to carry our message to the people to keep them informed totally of what's going on at the Capitol building and at the PSC Commission and with the utility companies.
So far, the group has over 20,000 signed petitions from people interested in the six-week-old organization. Eventually, it hopes to get 20 million signatures. Spokesperson Nancy Rawls says consumers ought to know why they'll be paying more for their utilities in the future when they may not have to. She says two bills currently before the legislature are in the best interest of the consumer. One's the Joint Generation Bill, operating now in 27 states. The other is the Kirkland-McGee Bill.
And one of the best consumer bills that's ever been written and presented to the state of Alabama, in our opinion. This bill would reconstruct the PSC. It would give the consumers a spokesperson, a consumer director at the PSC to intervene for us.
If passed, there would be 7 commissioners instead of 3 representing each district in the state, and there would be stricter ethics laws. Mrs. Rawls says some utility companies are fighting that bill, adding that PSC Commissioner Billy Joe Camp isn't in favor of it either. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
Airport Authority rules allow only 2 traffic controllers to picket, and they must stay within a designated area. They're not allowed to initiate conversations with passers-by. Last week, the Authority Board rejected a request that more controllers be allowed to picket and hand out leaflets, but the controllers say the rules violate their First Amendment right to free speech. So today, extra picketers showed up, and they broke the rule about starting conversations in order to pass out leaflets. The extra controllers picketed for about an hour before a security guard asked them to go. The picketers left without incident. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Gilmore says the fight against black-on-black crime has gotten off to a good start. He says in addition to the panel discussions, a massive family awareness program is underway.
We have bumper stickers ready, posters ready to go into businesses, and other plans are being made now. We plan workshops and other things that will bring the people together.
What's involved in family awareness?
Well, we hope to have a workshop on dope, prostitute, crime, you name it, it's in the workshop plan.
Gilmore says the discussions have been very effective, but from a crime official's point of view, it's too early to tell.
But I think that since Mark has got this group together, Mark Gilmore, the councilman, and you got all these interested citizens up here, I think that's the first step toward resolving the black-on-black crime issue.
The Family Awareness Program is scheduled to kick off on May 31st, and the next black-on-black crime forum will be the latter part of June. Both Chief Swindle and Councilman Gilmore say the family, church, and community will go a long way in solving some of the problems in the black community. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
I say to you, the University of Alabama must stand as a beacon that both flashes a warning signal, a beacon that gives philosophical credence to that which is right, a beacon that preserves and gives life to the very best that is in us. We have a long history here of doing exactly that. And I, for one, rest much better in the evening knowing that the value of that heritage, that tradition, that legend, I believe, lives here today as strong as it ever has in the past and will perform as well for its state.
I certainly do. Certainly do. Support it wholeheartedly. Give me a little help on it. Might give me a little help too in keeping my job. And I've not.
Do you have any late word on the bill? I know it's out of committee, that's all I know.
I don't know. First, like you kid. I think it'll pass, though.
I think it will, too.
I think enough Auburn people vote for it to pass it.
I say to you, the University of Alabama must stand as a beacon that both flashes a warning signal, a beacon that gives
philosophical credence to that which is right, a beacon that preserves and gives life to the very best that is in us.
Grand announcement or anything. I arrived a week ago Sunday and spent 20 years.
Where were you before?
And then I was assigned as the assistant agent in charge in Washington, D.C. There was much speculation as to how this boy had felt growing up, knowing his father was a proclaimed traitor to his... Well, I think if anyone in law enforcement gets too upset about critics, they're going to have a very miserable life, because there are a lot of critics. It's a very visible type activity. To arrest a person is probably one of the major events that could happen.
Bradley says the joint generation bills are not the magical wand answer to high utility cost, which he says proponents believe. Using charts listing the 29 states which allow joint generation, Bradley pointed out that only 4 have lower rates than Alabama, including the sister state of Georgia. Bradley says proponents' comparisons of Alabama Power Company rates with Georgia power rates is not a valid comparison, because he says Georgia is more industrialized than Alabama. Bradley says since 1975, when Georgia began joint generation, power rates have increased 43%, but at the same time he admitted Alabama Power Company rates have increased 60%. Bradley says his company is against the joint generation legislation for 2 main reasons: higher taxes and higher rates for customers.
If we have to sell the 10% that they want, which is more than their pro rata share to start with, we're going to have to replace that 10% at $1990. They want to buy that 10% at depreciated $1970. That replacement of that generating capacity, and you're talking about 10% of 2 very large units, are going to have to be made up by our customers at $1990. If joint generation passes and the proponents of the bill do what they want it to do, it will mean a tax-free authority.
Bradley says another reason Alabama Power Company is against joint generation is because the impending bill would not require territorial legislation, which defines the boundaries in which power suppliers can and cannot operate. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
Once every 5 years, they would get a 3-week paid vacation with their wife at any FAA station increase from the 10%. He would get a 10% automatic pay increase, which would be about $4,600. He would get an automatic step increase. I mean, it just burns me up. We as taxpayers have to put up with.
As done yesterday.
Yes, this, I don't think the general public knows what they're asking for. Whenever the steel workers ask for an increase, the press says it's 13% they're asking for, or 15%.
Dr. Lowry outlined 5 specific goals that the organization intends to closely aim for. One is to see that the 1965 Voting Rights Act is extended after it expires next year. Lowry says failure to continue that act would be nothing less than tragic. The other goals include proposed cutbacks by the Reagan administration, which Lowry says are assaults on the poor. Also in the objectives came challenges to the Democratic Party and Vice President George Bush.
We believe the Democratic Party is playing a deadly game. And that game is to allow the Reagan budget cuts to go into effect, its economic program go into effect, create chaos, as it will surely do, and then the Democrats will reap the political spoils in 1982 and 1984.
Lowry drew applause when he challenged Vice President Bush to place the administration on Alabama State University's side and preserve it along with other black institutions. Dr. Lowry says the country is sitting spellbound expecting a Western movie, but he adds that the Reagan production will turn out to be a horror movie for the poor. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
Watkins originally presented a list of rules governing the disposal of city property after Southern Bank inquired and purchased the baggage area at the old Union Station. He says his main concern is that everyone interested in buying a needed city property be given an equal chance to acquire it through public notification it's up for sale. Watkins says the city should also hold a public auction to get the highest possible price for the property. Councilman Bill Nunn agreed with Watkins' resolution with the exception of the proposed auction. Nunn presented a substitute motion deleting the auction, but it failed to carry. The two councilmen were then asked to work out their differences and come back to the council with yet another proposal. After several weeks of meetings and reaching a compromise, both councilmen presented a new resolution in which the proposed auction is deleted and there are other minor changes. Watkins says the rules are good in the absence of no other procedure on the subject. He says it includes the basic features which are in the city's best interest. The council voted unanimously to adopt the regulations. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Loaded cane, got a billy, knuckles. Excuse me, Mr. Holmes.
Without objection, leave of absence shall be granted. For the benefit of those of you that might have missed that announcement, our colleague, Representative Stark, his mother passed away yesterday, and
We'll have some others made increases until they will reorganize. And of course, if they are not reorganized,
No, I don't know.
the 24 and the commissioner make 23. Now.
Senator Big Ed Robertson from Northport ceased his filibuster against the local option bill to allow the Senate to reconsider it. And despite what one senator called heavy pressure from constituents, the bill passed on a vote of 16 to 15. Some amendments that may have made the bill more palatable to senators prohibit Sunday liquor sales and exempt state parks and cities with fewer than 6,000 citizens from having the option. Earlier this session, the House rejected a similar bill. On other matters, the Senate okayed a bill outlawing anyone from tampering with automobiles' odometers and requiring that a car's mileage be written on its bill of sale. And the Senate voted to give a supplemental appropriation of $285,000 to the Board of Pardons and Paroles. All of those bills must go to the House for concurrence. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Buying a new suit, isn't it?
Just a sport coat, pants, whatever I can put together.
That new suit is within the NCAA regulations, I reckon.
I guarantee you, if he's wearing it, I don't know where he got it, but he looks good in it, I'll tell you that.
Coach, would you How would you recommend Byron Braggs to some of the pro coaches?
Well, I don't think that's a fair question, but I recommend him. Brian has a great future, I think, in the pros. He has great ability, and he's injured a lot while he's at Alabama, but the best thing about him is he's bright. And the other thing, you go back and check his games he was a great player in, for the big games. And I think that's very important.
Who are you talking to in the pros?
I'm not.
Tell the truth, man.
All right, this is the truth. I've been just taking physicals for most of the NFL teams because most teams want their own physicians and doctors to see the players that are eligible for the draft, that they think that'll be drafted, 150 so-odd players. And I've been traveling around, and I've generally seen the same guys more than once. So that's generally what I've been doing, just taking a physical, filling out forms, all different kind of stuff like that, you know, running for them, doing different kind of drills, this general stuff like that. But they really haven't talked serious about who wants me, nothing like that, because you know, that's up in the wind.
State Attorney General Charles Graddick presented the case to the Montgomery County Grand Jury. The indictment was handed down late today after the jury heard evidence and listened to witnesses who told of the sale of the island, first to a corporation owned by a friend of Forrester, who later formed a company in which Forrester was a partner and half owner of the island. Included in the information presented to the jury was a record of a 21-day period from May 1st to May 21st, 1980. The jury was told that during that time, the island was appraised, bids were let, and on May 20th, a Forrester's business partner was the successful bidder. The jury was told that 1 day later, the land was deeded to Gulf States Properties, the firm owned by Forrester and his partner, Bobby Torres. The Attorney General's office is charging that Forrester used his position as conservation director for his own personal gain when the land deal was made. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News at the Montgomery County Courthouse.
That I thought that everybody here ought to hear. And number one has to do with a fellow who called himself, and I'll come back up from the far end over here to my right. That is Jean Lane, wife of Commissioner McMillan Lane. And she refuses to stay with us, sweet Al Phillips and his sweet wife, Martha. All you got to do is carry me hunting about twice a season, and we'll level us up. Are any of the members of the Montgomery Public Service Commission this time? Of course, we've got Alabama's the Mrs. Jean Holmes, wife of Roy Holmes, whom I Here's Sasser, and her chaperone, Ms. A.D. Davis from Jacksonville, Florida, who is Vice Chairman of the Board of Winn-Dixie.
The last rate increase the Public Service Commission granted Alagasco was in July 1979, a 4.9% increase. But what the consumers who spoke before the commission today didn't know was that Alagasco received a 33.4% cumulative increase since that time, granted by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which was passed on directly to the consumer, meaning the average residential customer's annual gas bill has risen about $105 since July 1979. Commissioner Billy Joe Camp told the group that much of the price increase came from the federal level and fuel decontrolling. He suggested that the group also write their congressional representatives asking for support from the federal level. Meanwhile, Camp and Commissioner Jim Folsom Jr. assured the group that they are aware of the problems in paying the utility bills and will give fair consideration to Alagasco's rate increase request. Gas company officials say they too are mindful of the high bills when the $12.3 million rate hike was submitted, adding they fought the increases in Washington but promised to assist those having trouble paying their bills. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
The House version of the bill would do away with the current 55-mile-per-hour speed limit on state four-lane highways and interstates. It would raise the limit to 60 miles per hour on 4 lanes and 65 on interstates. Trucks would follow the same speed limits if they're not overloaded. The bill's sponsor, Representative Lynn Greer, says the current speed limit is too slow. He says most people drive faster than 55 anyway, and says he's optimistic that the Reagan administration will repeal the 55 limit. Those who oppose the bill, including Public Safety Director Jerry Shoemaker, says the current speed limit is responsible for a drastic reduction in the number of highway fatalities. In 1973, there were 887 rural traffic deaths, compared to 618 in 1980. Another drawback to the bill is that the state may lose its federal highway funds for not complying with the national speed limit. The bill now goes to the Senate tomorrow at noon. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
The controversial parts of the bill would have required that a minor's parents or a woman's husband be notified before she could get an abortion. Testimony varied from pro-lifers who say a fetus is a person from the moment of conception to those who say a woman should have the freedom to choose whether to have a child or not. The bill would have required that women get complete counseling before consenting to an abortion, something doctors testified isn't always done now.
No one mentioned or acknowledged the possibility of emotional upheaval. No one cared about the unborn child. This bill would allow for informed consent of these patients going for an abortion. That is not taking place now.
But a woman who works at an abortion clinic says her clinic already adheres to the health department's informed consent rules.
The patient knows exactly what is going to happen to an abortion procedure. She knows what the complications of that procedure may be. She also knows all of her alternatives to the pregnancy, including birth and adoption.
One part of the bill would have established a state policy against abortions, even though the Supreme Court has ruled they're legal. Senators finally killed the bill by a vote of 8-5, some saying they don't need to pass an act simply to express a philosophy. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Two of the 3 bills were introduced by Committee Chairman Walter Owens and would give mental health and prisons $45 million each. Breaking each of the bills down, the prison money would be spent to complete the maximum security facility in St. Clair County, build a 600 medium security prison in West Jefferson County, to construct a 400-man medium security prison at some yet-to-be-determined site, and this is the first time a third new prison facility has been mentioned. The rest of the prison money would be spent on renovations at existing prison facilities, and $2 million would be set aside as a contingency fund. Rex Rayner, the man responsible to the governor for the prison system and 6 other departments, says this would hopefully bring the state into compliance with federal court orders. Rayner says Owens' bill spending $45 million for mental health could also end a court order over that system. The mental health money would renovate and expand current facilities to meet the court-ordered standards, but oddly enough would cut out as many as 52 bed spaces. A third bill by Representative Bob Patton would spend $4 million for the Department of Youth Services. All 3 of these bills, if passed by the legislature, would be effective immediately. Several committee members were worried about the need for that much money, saying the various departments will spend the whole amount, even if less would have sufficed. Also, an unemployment compensation bill to raise maximum benefits by about $20 in a 2-phase plan hit some nerve endings. Proponents of the bill say the benefits haven't been changed in 6 years and are outdated. Opponents of the bill claim the new, tighter regulations would cause as many as 200,000 current recipients to lose their benefits. They also claim the problems with unemployment benefits stem from fraud and not obsolescence. Nonetheless, that bill was passed. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
Business was very brisk at most tax preparation offices in town today. Clerks say their desks have been filled with tax forms waiting to be typed up for mailing. They say most of their business has been last minute, people waiting until the last day to file because they have to pay. Why'd you wait till the last minute?
Because I just got my return fixed up.
Were you afraid you're going to have to pay? Is that why you waited?
Yes. Matter of fact, it was.
They owe me money, and I owe them money, and we're from out of state, and I'm having to file Alabama and federal, and it's just a mess. I really don't, you know.
The local IRS office was relatively quiet today. A few people still coming in to get forms or get help in filing, but clerks say Monday and Tuesday the office was mobbed. Capitol Plaza and the downtown post office branches will be open until midnight tonight. If you get your forms in the mail by 12 o'clock, you won't be penalized. IRS officials say you can still file after the deadline. That is if you don't owe them any money. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
Spectators lined the practice field to see Auburn's third spring workout. Among them was Governor Fob James, whose son Tim is a candidate for a running back slot in the Tigers' new wishbone offense. Auburn coach Pat Dye insists his players have a long way to go before becoming a football team. Dye believes the talent is there, though he's quick to point out it's not proven talent yet. The Tigers worked on clearing that hurdle today in their first game-type scrimmage.
We set the scrimmage up where offensively, we just ran a few basic plays. Defensively, we ran a few basic defenses that the offense had worked on, and just tried to go out and not confuse them and have as intense practice as we could have. And you know, I thought we made some progress in that area.
I noticed the warm-up drills are very spirited. Is that part of the Pat Dye philosophy?
Well, I just don't think you can play the game without enthusiasm, and you know, I'd like to compliment our coaches. They've done a great job of getting that across, and I think we're getting a fine job coaching done right now.
I noticed Coach Casey joined the injury list today. Did he get a little overzealous in there with the play?
Well, Coach Casey is really an outstanding coach, and in order to teach, you have to demonstrate, and you know, he was demonstrating and butted a guy without a headgear on and cut his head.
That kind of enthusiasm has many Auburn faithful smiling. The Tigers will continue their spring workouts until May 9th, when the squad will be divided for the annual A-Day game. Dave Cody, WSFA TV Sports.
Members of the Consumer Alliance say they're against any unfair rate hikes, and they're trying to give the consumer a voice. Representative Bob McKee says the way the PSC is set up now, the public doesn't know if the rate hikes Alabama Power charges are fair or not. He says his bill to reorganize the PSC would provide for a statewide consumer director to give the people a fair shake, and would have experts working under the director to counter the utilities legal experts. He says his bill would also define what the base rate should be and what could be included in it. He says promotional advertising such as these should not be paid for by taxpayers. District Attorney Jimmy Evans told the group now is the time for consumers to rise up and stop footing Alabama Power's bills.
They have their own college of lawyers. They all come out of the same firm. When they go through that firm, they graduate out of the firm, they go on into the management of the Southern Company. And it's a long line tradition of experts with years and years experience to representing the utility. And who pays for it? We pay for it.
What these speakers all agree on is that the PSC is ineffective and must be changed. They say the only way to keep corruption out of it and bring it down to the level of the people is through this bill. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News at the Consumer Alliance meeting.
The jury took approximately 2 days to consider evidence and hear 10 witnesses in the Forrester case. Among those witnesses was Robert Torres, Forrester's partner in the alleged land deal. State prosecutors alleged it took 21 days for Forrester to convert the 6-acre state-owned island into a proposed personal land venture for himself. They told the jury the period from May 1st, 1980 to May 21st, 1980 was the time frame in which Splash Island was transformed from a wildlife sanctuary to a business venture for Dick Forrester, the then Conservation Commissioner for the state of Alabama. Dick Forrester now becomes the first Fob James cabinet-level official to be accused of crimes while performing his state duties. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News at the Montgomery County Courthouse.
And up until yesterday, nobody was really sure what other was going to be.
The marchers say it's an effort to ensure the university's survival. When they first marched in February, the students vowed to come back again to let the governor know they're determined to keep the university's name in the merger. During the first march, there was sentiment to keep ASU a traditionally black institution. Today's rally focused on integration.
We're not afraid to have white students on our campus. We'd be glad to have. Why? Every time we merge or integrate, it's always the black school that's got to disappear. Somebody tell me why. There's not but one reason, and it's racism.
Although ASU reportedly would accept the other universities under its name, Dr. Lowry told the crowd there's a national assault on blacks and black universities.
They want to take away our institutions of higher learning because they want to control the minds of our young black people.
Dr. Lowry says poor whites are also under the same attack. Jane Matheson, WSFA TV News.
The budget was drafted by Ways and Means Committee Chairman Walter Owens, who based his figures on a relatively conservative 3% growth in revenues, a figure argued as too low by some. Owens' budget totals nearly $363 million, some $22 million more than this year's appropriation. One major change to Owens' budget was Representative Sam Letson's amendment to pay $6 million instead of $3 million to county and cities who house state prisoners. The extra $3 million was pulled from the appropriation to the prison system, leaving them $46 million instead of $49 million in the budget. The Department of Energy, slated for a $200,000 increase under Owens' proposal, lost $90,000 of it to the Department of Examiners of Public Accounts, which was faced with a reduction of funds. In all, there were 21 amendments offered, but only 6 were adopted. Most of the amendments only shifted money around, not increasing the total budget as recommended by Owens. After just more than 2.5 hours of debate, the House overwhelmingly approved the general fund budget 92-8 and sent it on to the Senate. Minutes later, the House adjourned before taking up a controversial dog racing track bill for Madison County. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News in the House of Representatives.
The employees say their main concern is that they will be downgraded, that they will be frozen into a position without a chance to advance, and that their jobs will be dead-ended. They say they don't believe the survey done by a group of consultants for use in the new reclassification program is equitable. They say the way the proposed plan is set up now, many employees would be downgraded, especially clerical workers, but would still be doing the same amount of work. They say the classification rules are vague with a lot of holes and is being done by an administration with a negative attitude towards state employees.
The intent, I think, it seems to most state employees, whether it was the intent of the people who are doing it or not, the intent seems to be to downgrade an employee and to stop his service with the state, and it's just been demoralizing employees all across Alabama. I know I've been in every section of the state, and it's just had a devastating effect on state employees, especially career state employees.
The Personnel Board says they'll take the consultants' recommendations on a new reclassification and pay plan into account, along with suggestions from state employees, before they make a final decision on the plan. The state employees say they're not at all happy with the proposed plan as it is now, and they say they'll fight it all along the way. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
Bankers want the bill so that their investigators who are looking into credit card fraud and check forgery can make arrests. The investigators would be trained by the Department of Public Safety at the bank's expense. But some senators objected, saying that the Senate is approaching the creation of a police state by granting investigative powers to so many factions. Senator Michael Figures from Mobile says if the legislature grants police powers to banks, how can it turn down requests that could come from grocery stores, drug stores, or even high schools? The bill passed by a vote of 16-11. It now goes to the House. A bill that had fewer problems passing the Senate gives Bear Bryant the chance to continue coaching at the University of Alabama.